wanted to start first with our why, which Brielle spoke a bit about at the outset. But why did Beth and I create PwrSwitch? And really, it's because we have been your clients. We know how hard it is to capture good evidence, and we know the difference that good evidence can make. And you might ask why evidence is important at all. And really, the short answer is it's the foundation for building a winnable case. If your clients are working with police or a lawyer, whether that's legal aid or otherwise, a mediator, or if they're self-representing, a comprehensive record of communications evidence really just increases the odds of them getting a good and just outcome. And Wayne Barkauskas, who presented a few weeks ago, something that he said was that it's not enough for somebody to say that somebody did or said something, that really you must have it in writing to become part of the record of legitimate evidence. And we can talk a bit about it later if you want, but how people can get that down and get it into their evidentiary record. So what's the problem? The problem is that stressed clients means that it's really hard for them to focus on capturing all of the text and email evidence that they need, because in the long list of things that they're managing to keep their lives together, this tends not to rate. And part of the problem is that the status quo is to screenshot everything, which just from a practical point of view is just really hard to keep up with, especially if they're getting messages at volume. And then there are issues that render screenshots almost useless as evidence. For example, they may not have a time or date stamp. It might just say today or Greg at the top of a screenshot. And then that begs the question, what day or what Greg sent that message? Again, if the email or text chains are long, they can be overlapping and difficult to piece together. And the biggest problem that we have heard from a counsel or a defense point of view is that as individuals, we tend to capture what we think is important rather than what really is important. So for example, it might feel important that somebody threatened to kill your dog. But unless you can sort of capture that over time, so that maybe a person has threatened to kill your dog every day for months to prove a pattern of behavior, then there's no context for that one capture. And finally, people might not recognize the consequences of not capturing all this text and email evidence well. And really, again, the simple answer is that if they don't do it well, then legally they have no argument, even if they're in the right. So the solution, the one excellent solution is PwrSwitch. And what does PwrSwitch do? So it is an application that automates what people are doing manually, which is take a bunch of poorly captured screenshots. It automates the collection of text, email, and phone log history between two people, saves it all in a time and date stamped word searchable document on the cloud. So that might be weeks worth, it might be months worth, it could even be years worth if necessary, providing that it's not been deleted. So PwrSwitch does this all easily and quickly. So this is why we say it gives a sense of power back to those who feel they have none, hence the name PwrSwitch, and control back when they feel like they've lost it. Again, the status quo is screenshots, and so what people will often do if they're approaching police or a lawyer is they'll print out what they have, and then suddenly they have this pile of pictures, essentially, that are difficult to make sense out of and put into sequence and make it sort of get some insight to what the true story is. But now with PwrSwitch, everything is in one tidy and searchable place. The other thing is that if texts are accidentally deleted by a client or purposely deleted by someone else, or if their phone is lost or broken, all that history is there if they need it. It's one of the reasons we've been suggesting that if you have clients who are experiencing abusive or threatening behavior over their devices right now, we really strongly recommend that they sign up for a PwrSwitch account to capture all of that history so that they have it as insurance. I'll talk a bit more about this later, but PwrSwitch is completely free right now. There's no risk, no obligation, but all of this sense of security that a person might need, particularly when we come out of quarantine a few months from now. So additional features. So raw data reports are available if required. What this means is that for cases that tip into criminal territory, like extortion or maybe criminal harassment, often defense will require IP addresses to prove the source of the communications. So this is to prove that something came from a specific, originated within a specific device or computer. So those are available on request right now. We hope in a future iteration that clients will be able to just request these as they need them, but right now we can do that on request. Encrypted in transit really just means that the data is secure. So if you imagine a text message kind of driving in a virtual Brinks truck to our PwrSwitch servers, that's really what encrypted in transit means. Digitally authenticated, that means that the reports have a PwrSwitch digital signature on them. It's like a little badge on the bottom of the report, and it indicates that everything within it is authentic. It's not been edited. So if somebody goes in and makes changes, like a person sees a message that they don't really like and they delete it, then no signature will appear there. And really it diminishes the utility of the report as evidence and probably also puts the integrity of the person in question generally. So channel, date, and time clearly identified. So what we mean by channel here is that it's clear that if it's a text or an email and who sent it. So benefits of PwrSwitch. For police and other counsel, patterns of behavior over time are critical. So what this means is that you want proof of an escalating threat, for example. It becomes key in a person's ability to either press charges or get a restraining order or an emergency protection order to prove that it's not just a one-off event. It's also a defense against cherry picking. So often individuals will be accused of cherry picking the worst of the worst. Because PwrSwitch offers context and history, that argument really goes away because the reports make the case quite objectively and definitively that sort of what's true. And because it captures both sides of the conversation, again, as individuals, we tend not to do this. We just collect sort of the opposing side. And because it collects it over a long period of time, it means, again, that if somebody goes to police or a lawyer or a mediator, that all of those individuals working to support that client are able to get up to speed very quickly with respect to what has actually transpired and not what they're being told has transpired. So in this way, it really expedites investigations and legal processes generally, because it just avoids all the he said, she said, and what can end up being sort of meaningless and circular arguments. We refer to the PwrSwitch reports as kind of the central source of truth because all the subjectivity is removed. As somebody else said, it's like these are like the ultimate dispute resolution tool in that way. So how can the reports be used? So obviously they can be used as evidence. So again, police, for this is on the right-hand side here is sort of an example, not sort of, it is an example of what a report looks like. So you'll see at the top, there's kind of aggregates of how many text messages the guy sent, how many the women sent, how many phone calls were made, etc. And then you kind of get a time and date stamp sense of what goes on below it. So yes, so obviously it can be used as evidence. So in cases of divorce, police investigations, for litigation, whether that's criminal or otherwise, and we're seeing them used a lot recently in custody, resolving custody issues. So this is particularly around varying parenting orders. COVID especially has brought up a lot of issues with respect to co-parenting. And again, these reports really help substantiate what's true in terms of varying an order. So it can also just be a starting point. So you're having issues, you approach the police, a mediator, an arbitrator, or maybe a lawyer. Again, PwrSwitch just lets them get all of that communication history up to date so that they know what they're dealing with, and it really helps speed access to justice. And maybe they're just communication records. So you might have clients who are working with a therapist or with a parent coordinator, and they don't see them so much as evidence, they're just insight into what's actually been said and maybe how people communicate. And that just lets them better navigate child coordination decisions. And finally, for people who are self-representing, and I know that's a lot of people these days, the reports are just really easily digestible by judges as evidence. So that means that for people that are applying for restraining orders or emergency protection orders, that the argument can be quickly seen. Again, because it's got this historical sense, you can see this, you can easily plot out sort of escalating threat, for example. And for anybody who might have $500 to go to a lawyer because they want to, it's a lawyer who does what's called unbundled services. If you just have a few $100s to spend, having a lawyer coach you or just do the hard bits, you don't want to spend that money to have them organize your digital evidence, particularly if it's critical to your case. So this just, we'll let PwrSwitch do it for you. So it's not just for documenting negative things. Again, per Wayne a few weeks ago, he communicated that you also want to capture evidence of good behavior. So if and when things come to court or to a mediator, or even to a parent coordinator, that all of a judge, etc., they will all look favorably on attempts at reasonable accommodation. So just like you want to capture bad patterns of behavior, I think it's also important to have a record of positive repeated efforts on behalf of a client to support their position. How do you get PwrSwitch? So it's pretty straightforward. You go to our website, which is PwrSwitch.com. Incidentally, it doesn't have vowels because that name was taken. So they go to PwrSwitch.com. They sign up for an account. They just simply enter however they communicate with this other party. So their phone number and email address, or maybe it's either or, maybe they only communicate by text. And then they enter their sender's name. So this is the other person, and however they communicate with them. They choose a date range, which might be weeks, might be months, might be years. And then they just generate a report, and it comes as a PDF. And as I mentioned, because of COVID and because we, sort of in response to this really weird time, we are offering PwrSwitch free until May 31st, and that's for 6 months unlimited use. And that's really because we recognize that stress can increase bad behavior, uncertainty, fear, financial stress, employment stress, all of it. So again, if you have clients who are experiencing this, it would be great to get this loaded on their phones, just as insurance, really. We want to help because we know what it's like, particularly under duress and stressful circumstances. So it's available for both Android and iPhone. The iPhone will be available next week. We're just finishing up development on it. The way you get on the application is slightly different on each. So on Android, you can do it entirely from your phone. For iPhone, you will require access to a laptop of some kind because we're pulling a backup from the phone, particularly for specifically for the text messages. And we recognize that the technology is pretty new. With that, we have an amazing development team, as well as Beth and I, who are just really committed to ensuring that everybody has an excellent experience and has all the support that they need, either getting on the platform or generating reports. So we are available like all the time, and really want to be here to support people. So you can, of course, you can reach us through the website, but you can also reach us directly as well. And I think that's it.